is a July meeting of the East Valley Astronomy Club. So welcome everybody. Glad to see you here tonight. It's a good place to be since it's air conditioned in here and it's not outside. So it's a great place to be. You can see the telescope here. The telescope here will be used a little bit later on. James is going to be giving us a short presentation on 3D printing of astronomy little tools. And so he's actually going to show some of the tools that can be printed with a 3D printer live on a telescope here. So that should be fun a little later on. Anyway, let's go ahead and get going. As you can see, I'm going to take this out so I can move a little bit. And we'll kind of get going here. So for those in the room and for those on Zoom that are joining us on Zoom tonight, thanks for being here. And as always, I say it every month, we hope you enjoy yourselves here tonight or at home on Zoom, wherever you happen to be. We hope you learn something interesting. We hope you make a new friend, and we hope you reconnect with old friends while you're here. So that's always our goals why we're having a meeting here today. Do we have any visitors here tonight before we get any further in the meeting? Any visitors tonight? We have one visitor. So can you, right here. So we're going to have you introduce yourself to us here in just a second. You can see the screen right there. It's a very simple quiz. No, it's not even a quiz, just a simple list of things. So anyway, all right.
Hello. All right. My name is Ethan Levitt, and I live right next to here. I was renting a house with my mom. She's helping me move into my new dorm, and saw this little reserve place. I thought it was cool, so we came and walked around. And we went to the observatory. This was last week, Friday, Saturday, and with the observatory telescope, and I liked what I saw. That was really cool. I don't have a lot of experience, and my favorite thing is what I learned last week is when we were looking at the moon, and they were telling us about the rebounds in the center of the craters, and I thought that was really amazing. And yeah.
You talking about the little knob in the bottom center of the crater?
In the middle of the crater where there's like the dust cloud.
Uh-huh.
And I think they called it a rebound where it gets hit and it pops up and it doesn't fall back down because of the gravity.
Okay, all right. That might have been me because I usually point that out. So it could have been me. That's why I asked. So anyway, I was working with Gordon there last weekend. So Gordon and Alice. So anyway, how fun. Well, thank you. Welcome for being here. Any other visitors tonight? All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Thanks for everyone for being here, whether you're a visitor or not. Tonight's agenda is pretty straightforward. So we have the normal announcements we do for 5 minutes at the beginning of every meeting. We have something a little different tonight. James asked me to mention this. There's stuff over there on those two tables. And so during the break, if you want to go over and take a look at that stuff, it's like $5 for anything you want to take. And if you want something, grab it. It's just odds and ends pieces. Anyway, you can take a look, and if you want something, let James know, and you can pay Brooks. He'll take your money. He's on the back table back there. So anyway, so that'll be available during the break and then after the meeting as well. We do have a couple of member presentations tonight. So one of them is moi. I'm actually doing a short, like little 5-10 minute one. I took a trip with another Steve, who's actually in the audience right there. And we went out and toured the 3 observatories at Mount Graham about 3 weeks ago. It was a really great time. So we had a great trip, actually. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll show you some pictures. Then James Yoder is going to be talking about how to 3D print little tools for your telescope and astronomy and things like that. And in fact, this telescope sitting right here is from James. And some of the orange things you see on there are some of the things he's printed, and he'll do a little show and tell and demo and all that good stuff for us tonight. Then we'll do our normal break. We'll take our 15-minute stretch, talk, have something to drink, have something to eat, those sorts of things. And then our main presentation tonight is Kevin Schindler from the Lowell Observatory. Kevin's right back over there sitting at the table. And he's going to talk a little bit about the new Discovery Center that's getting ready to open up there at Lowell. And he's also going to then talk a little bit about Robert Burnham's book on the Celestial Handbook. So a couple of nice, interesting topics there tonight. And we also have in the audience tonight, Howard Anderson sitting here in the front row. He just gave me access to a little, a couple-minute video he took of the eclipse from Waco, Texas, back a few months ago. So at one point here, Yeah, I was going to say maybe after I do my little thing on the gram, we'll take a quick thing, look at his little short video, and then we'll have James come up and do the 3D printing thing. So that should be fun. All right, so there's the agenda for the evening. General announcements. We do these announcements every meeting, so you're used to seeing some of these things, but they are always new people, and so we would like the new people to know things as well. So first of all, if you need to join or renew your membership, there's at least 3 ways of doing that. You can go out to our website. This is a screen capture from our website. And you'll notice there's 3 ways to join or renew your membership. You can do it in person at the meeting. Basically, you go back and you talk to Brooks there on the back wall at the table there, and he'll take your money and get you a badge and all that kind of stuff if you'd like a badge as well. You can also do it online with a form and PayPal if you'd like to do that as well. Or you could actually do it through good old U.S. postal mail and mail a check, that sort of thing. So we'll take it any way we'd like to have it. So we'll make it easy for you. Once you're a new member, notice that on the web page there's that blue button called the new member guide. Should you click on that, it actually brings up a little PDF. It tells you what it is to be a member and what's involved, and just information about being a member of the club. If you'd like to know what's happening here at EVAC, there's at least 4 ways to know, and I'm going to talk about them here really quickly. I've been doing this for months now, but it's always been 3 ways. This is the first time I said 4 ways because I finally decided to quit being lazy and add the Facebook page in. So I just added the Facebook page in, which will be the 4th way. So anyway, out on our website, you can always go out to news and events. Whoops, I went too far. You can always go out to our website and click on the homepage and click the subscribe button. And if you subscribe basically to our email distribution list, and you'll get, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 emails a month out of this. We do not send your email out anywhere. It's not a spam machine. We don't sell your email address out to other companies or whatever. So you'll get a few emails from us just really announcing things that are coming up or whatever. Like we're coming in the fall season. We'll have our big fall star party probably towards end of October, 1st of November, and you'll see announcements starting out about that and stuff. So anyway, that's one way to get information about what's happening. Also on our webpage, you can always go out to the events and meetings tab and take a look there. And there's a calendar for every month, and anything that's happening that month will be on the calendar, and usually a little bit of detail about it. If you click on it, it'll tell you what it is and where it is and what time it is and those sorts of things. So it's just another way to keep involved. There's also a newsletter that comes out once a month. And it tells information about what's happening that month as well. And we keep a record of all those newsletters. So you can go back a few years and actually look at old newsletters and stuff. So they're all out there for you to view. And then lastly, and this is the one I just added for this month finally, and that's our Facebook page. So if you can join our Facebook page, and all sorts of things are going on out there. Notice that I think it's on that page. Yeah, when I took this screen capture about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had 990 members on that Facebook page. So it's quite a reach. And I actually just directed somebody there yesterday, somebody new, and I noticed it was 991. So someone had joined since I took the screen capture even. Might be 992 now because I think he actually joined. So anyway, that's how you can keep track of things as you go along. If you need equipment to join the fun, basically, a couple different ways to doing that. And once again, out on our website there, you go to the home page, scroll down a little bit, and notice that you have used equipment for sale. So you don't have maybe quite the bucks you need for that brand new scope. There's some really nice used scopes that we get all the time. In fact, we had 2 this week that arrived. So James has just talked to one of the folks actually. And the one that came in this week it's a nice little go-to scope, and it's pretty much brand new out of the box. It was gifted to the guy and he went, it was nice, but I don't really want it. So he's basically giving it to us, and we're going to try to sell it then to somebody else. So it's a nice scope. It's used, but not really used. So there's some good deals out there for scopes like this. Also, we have a rental pool as well. So if you'd like to try something out, there's always rental gear as well. We rent normal, regular telescopes, and we also have a little kit where you can do astrophotography as well. So it's got the filters and some other things in there you need, the cameras and whatnot to do astrophotography. So if you ever wanted to try astrophotography, but didn't know if you wanted to spend the money on it quite yet, rent this thing for a week or 2 and then try it out. See what you think about astrophotography. So that's available to you also. If you'd like to learn more about the hobby, like we have a new visitor tonight, said he didn't really know much. Once again, on our website, down underneath the news and resources page, there's a virtual beginners lab. There's all those little blue boxes. I think there's 33 of those blue boxes lined up on the page, and each one brings up a little blurb about whatever that topic is and tries to give you a little bit more training. So anyway, that's available for you as well. James, any classes coming up in the near future that you're aware of?
Not currently, but if you're interested, email me and I'll put you on the list. And when we get enough people, I'll start the class.
Yeah, we do offer occasionally like a beginner telescope class, and then there's actually a beginning sort of astrophotography class as well. James actually teaches those for us. All right, and if you would like to get involved, the two primary things we have here that you can get involved with are, number one, you can help manage and run and operate the telescope and work with the crowds and stuff over at our observatory, just a 5-minute walk from here over in the Riparian Center. Every Saturday every Friday and Saturday, it's open, weather permitting, of course. It's kind of hard to do it on cloudy nights. But anyway, we are there every Friday and Saturday from dusk until about 9:30. Park closes at 10, so they like us to start closing up around 9:30 to get out of the park by then. Anyway, it's a great way to get involved. And then on the second Friday of every month in the grass out in front of the observatory, you can bring your own telescopes, set it up, and take a look at whatever you want to and share that with the public if you'd like to as well. In addition to that, we have regular events at HOAs and schools and science centers and all sorts of things out there where we take telescopes in and show people the night sky. In fact, we just had an event, about a week ago? Was that about a week ago? Gordon and Alice were there. I was there. Claude was there. Several of us were there. It was a group of young girls actually out in Queen Creek. So, and Alice, I'm going to give you a little thing. She did a great job. They wanted a woman there to kind of show the girls, hey, you know, science isn't just for guys. Women are involved too. And so they really wanted a woman there. And so Alice came and Jessica was there as well, and they did a bang-up job. So, in fact, she came with cards and all sorts of things to show the girls. She did a great job, so I was really impressed. So anyway, so that's available to you as well. If you'd like to get involved with that, we could always use help. We do have some events coming up, like we're doing the Arboretum out by Globe here in about another, month, six weeks, something like that. We're got an event we're doing out at the Diamondback Stadium, I think on the same day, actually. We have two events on the same day. So there's lots of ways to get involved and give back to the community. If you're happy to have this club, I show this slide about every other meeting. These are some of the people that are sort of leading the club and, you know, put a number of hours in each month to make sure things happen. And notice that Marty's name is in red. Marty is looking to step away from the publishing piece here. So we're looking for a replacement for Marty. It's probably 2, maybe 3 hours a month, if you're wondering what you're sort of volunteering for, what kind of workload. And Marty will show you what you need to do. He'll make sure you have the software you need to do it. But basically, he handles mostly our newsletter publication every month. And so like myself and Jake and James, several people here in the room, we write articles. We send it all to Marty. Marty collects it all, puts it into like a newsletter type format, spell checks it, grammar checks it, makes us all look good. And then Marty sends it out to all you folks to read every month. So if you're interested in maybe helping out as publishing this newsletter, please let us know. Like I said, Marty's looking to step away for a while. So anyway, that's available to you as well. Also, as always, we do have a board as well. There's the board members listed up there, and they're always there providing steady guidance. So that's a nice thing as well. All right, so that is the announcements. We got through that all. So we're going to do a couple of member presentations now. One of them's me, so this should be an easy transition here. Steve, would you like to come? Oh, sure, I would. I'd love to come. So anyway, we'll do it that way. And then James will do it as well. And then I'm also going to play the video from Howard showing the eclipse from a couple of months ago from Waco, Texas. So about 3 weeks ago today, actually, I think it was, myself and another member of the club, we went down to Mount Graham. out near Safford on the eastern border. And there's actually 3 telescopes, 3 observatories out there on Mount Graham. So they're listed there, the sub-millimeter radio telescope, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, and then the large binocular telescope are out there. And I signed up for the tour months ago because they fill up pretty fast. They only take about 8 people at a time, and they only do it on Fridays and Saturdays, and they don't do every Friday even. And they just do it for a few months during the summers when they do it. And it's a great little tour. It's kind of a day. It's definitely a day, full day to do it all, but it's just a lot of fun. The other person that went with me was also Steve, so the 2 Steves, and we just sort of turned it into a camping trip. We did 4 days of camping, and then 1 full day was just spent at the telescope itself out of those 4. Anyway, there's the travelers, the 2 Steves. So anyways, the other Steve is right there. And like I said, we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. What's Steve's? Oh, that's right. Camping without beer is just sitting in the woods. So anyway, so there's Steve's shirt. By the way, Steve's telescope there is sort of a Franken telescope. That is an Orion Dobsonian telescope. It's a tabletop model, but as you know, Steve's a rather tall guy, so a tabletop isn't necessarily going to work for him. So he adapted it to a Celestron tripod. So that's an Orion Dobsonian sitting on a Celestron tripod. And he created a wood adapter plate that basically had the matching bolt patterns for each one so he could adapt them together. Came out really well. He drilled it out, added brass fittings with, female threaded things to hold the bolts on. Actually, he's holding it up right there. So it actually came out really, really well. A nice little adapter to adapt the two things together. So anyway, we had a great time is what it boils down to. Started with these fine hotel accommodations. So notice that was a beautiful hotel we stayed at. It was wonderful. That was the bedroom, by the way. Over there was the living room. We had a wonderful living room. There was the kitchen. So it was a very well-equipped hotel. And then back behind that tree over there was the bathroom. So anyway, they actually did have pit toilets there. But anyway, do you notice though, kind of right there on the, I guess that would be the left-hand side, right on the edge of the photograph, there's like a black box. That's a bear box. And apparently Mount Graham has the highest concentration of bears of any mountain in the Southwest. So anyway, because it's an island unto itself, it's just this peak with, miles and miles of blazing hot desert around it. So whatever's on that mountain stays on that mountain. And in fact, there's animals that live up there that don't live anywhere else. So there's some ecological things happening up there and so forth. So anyway, it's kind of a fun place to be. Anyway, we had a great trip. It was fun. Anyway, the tour starts in Safford. So we drove back down the mountain, got to Safford, and the tour leaves out of Eastern Arizona College at their Discovery Park Center. They have an observatory there and some other things happening. And they actually have their own observatory there as well. It's a 20-inch Cassegrain that they put in there, and it was donated to them by University of Arizona. And from here, it's actually about a 2-hour drive up to the telescopes. So you have quite a bit of paved roads, but that last 40 minutes to the telescopes is all on dirt roads, and it's interesting. It's a ride. So anyway, but it's a lot of fun. We had a good time. Anyway, when you get up there, there are 3 telescopes sitting on the top. One of them is the sub-millimeter radio telescope. I loved it because that was the first and only radio telescope I've ever been around in my life. So having never seen one before, I had lots of questions. And because there's only 8 people on the tour, I could ask lots of questions without feeling like I was just ruining somebody else's experience. So I had a great time up there. As you can see, their most recent claim to fame is they helped with the imaging of the M87 and the Sagittarius A-star supermassive black holes. They were part of that project to image those. So they were rather proud of that, actually. Notice that slanted roof on the top, that roof spins, and apparently they get a lot of snow up there. And they found out that when you move that roof, that snow wants to slide off. And so right after they built this, they had to get more funding because they had to basically build that bomb shelter entrance and exit because they thought if someone happens to walk out and that snow's coming down, it'll kill them. In fact, they told us that nobody even parks there during the winter because they've actually had a couple cars destroyed when all tons of snow drops on them and just crushes them. So anyway, that was kind of an interesting little side note on that. Anyway, you go into the telescope. It had a nice little control room. If you're curious, they run Linux, not Windows. But anyway, this is just the control room. Notice the blacked out windows. So there are windows, but you can black them out. But notice it's pretty bare bones. There was one telescope operator up there at the time. Yes. Yeah, that modern telescope with the buttons. And notice there's one just off the camera picture too. So anyway, all the modern things. So anyhow, it's funny. I laughed at the touchstone to myself. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's true. Microwave. Yeah. No direct lines. Anyway, that's just the control room. Just off of the control room is the actual dish, though. So they have a 10-meter parabolic dish up there that's collecting your signals. It was not in use during the time we were there. It could have been. It's daytime. You can run a radio telescope anytime, but it wasn't in use at the time. I tried to get a couple people in there just so you could see some scale of the size of the dish as well. And that is fed into essentially the receiver room. Now, this is the room that fascinated me the most because once again, I'd never really been around a radio telescope before, so I was quite fascinated with it all. And notice if I can get my mouse to work here. Let's see, where's my mouse? There's my mouse. See this little rounded area right here? There's actually a round plate on the wall there with this little gizmo I just highlighted. And actually, they sent the signal into the room through a hole in the wall. And then there's this little thing that I'm pointing out there. It's like a little metal mirror that can redirect the signal wherever they want it to go. In fact, I kind of zoomed in on it. Here's that little thing. And see this little surface right here? That is just a metal plate that they can rotate or swivel. And when they swivel it, they can send a signal the other way. Very high tech, of course. And it could go to radio receiver 1, or which is tuned for certain frequencies, or it could go to radio receiver 2 just by tilting that little panel and kind of reflecting the signal one way or the other. And then, of course, each of the receivers to get a better signal to noise ratio and all that sort of stuff. They have cooling equipment for both the receivers and all that, where they actually are cooling some of the components and whatnot. I think I asked like 2.3 million questions when I was in that room. I'm sure when I left, the guy was like, thank God that guy's out of here. So anyway, I had a lot of questions because, like I said, I'd never seen anything like that before. It's quite fascinating to me. So that was just the receiver room. Next up, we went over to the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, or VAT. And this was essentially built because they have a telescope that's been in Rome forever, but because of the light pollution, the growth of the city, blah, 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 they just can't really do anything with that telescope anymore. So they built this one because now you can, of course, collect the data anywhere and send it to wherever you want to analyze it. So they actually have usually a priest or two, a Jesuit priest or two will be up here for anywhere from a month, a couple months at a time. And so this telescope was actually a little nicer digs. They all had like little apartments for the astronomers could stay and all this, but everything was just a little bit cut above here on the Vatican one, because most astronomers will come in, spend 2-3 days and go home. These guys can spend a couple months. So they kind of treat them a little better, I think, for that reason. Just as an aside, I pointed out that little yellow rope you see kind of going around. They are really, really serious about that yellow rope. In fact, they said, if you don't believe us, cross it, and you'll be down at the bottom of the mountain. There's a prison, and there's people actually that didn't believe and are in that prison at the bottom of the mountain now out there in Safford. Apparently, there's a squirrel or whatever that they just don't want you to mess with. It's an endangered thing. It only is there. And also, it's that, and also it's considered sacred land by the Indians. So they had a heck of a fight even getting the telescopes built up there because the Indians didn't want to give it up. The ecology people didn't want to give it up. And everything. So eventually they agreed to give them 6.2 acres of land. And all three observatories sit on those 6.2 acres. And they have a rope, and you do not cross that rope, period. They will not allow it. In fact, the 6.2 acres includes the road up to the observatories. So they have a locked gate, and that road is considered part of their 6.2 acres. So the road's all of probably 10 feet wide. And so they actually have to radio, I'm coming up, no one come down. And then when you get up there, you say, okay, I'm clear. And then you always have to radio because if you meet another car, somebody's backing up because there's nowhere to go. So anyway, they're very serious about that. Anyway, the Vatican telescope, there's their control room. Notice it's a little bit nicer than the radio telescope control room was. Better furniture, better tabletops. Do they have a push button phone? It's a little more modern. It's push button, but it's a little more modern. Anyway, this is very nice. Like I said, their apartments, everything were a little bit better up there as well. Well, here's the actual telescope. So it's a 1.83 meter dish. It's pointed straight up right now. You can't really see the secondary mirror at the top from the angle where I'm standing, but that's the mirror. Then you see the little mount for the equipment at the bottom, spectrographs, cameras, whatever you want to do. I kind of zoomed in on the back side of that equipment bay there. So you kind of see it from both sides. It has 4 stations on it, so you can have 4 different pieces of equipment hooked up at once. So that's what that is. And then I stood back a couple of feet so I could see the secondary mirror above the main mirror. And so there it is there. You can kind of see it up in, where's my mouse? There's my mouse. There's the secondary mirror right in there. And actually, not only can it reflect the light back down to the equipment package, but actually you can put equipment in there as well and take direct measurements from the primary focal point. So they can take a lot of readings from different places here. So it's kind of fun looking at all that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll repeat what Steve just said. He was the guy on the tour with me. He said that telescope, or at least that point on the telescope, is an F1. So very, very, very fast scope. This is for the folks on Zoom and for the people in the room didn't hear. And they take very large swaths of sky in the infrared all at once with that scope. So it's a really nice setup they had up there. Yeah.
They've also just fully automated the Vatican telescope.
Oh, okay.
It's about a $500,000 project.
Okay. All right. Cool. I didn't know. That was the one telescope where there was no one around to ask questions. So there was a guy at the radio telescope. There was a wonderful guy named Elliot at the Large Binocular Telescope, but this one, there was no one there at the time. In fact, we actually had to go into the apartments and look at the bedrooms and the bathrooms and the kitchens and all that. And it was kind of fun to see kind of how they would live. So when they were there. The last one that we saw was the Large Binocular Telescope, the LBT. So this is obviously the world's largest pair of binoculars, is what this is. And it has 2 8.4 meter discs, or mirrors, I should say, not discs, mirrors, that work in tandem. So they're mounted on the same mount. They move and rotate and everything together. It's pretty fascinating. And they boast, to me, at least when I was up there, that it has more resolution than the Hubble does. Now, it's still looking through a lot of dirty air, but it's got more resolution than Hubble. So anyway, one of the things that was interesting about this is that you're used to having a dome that slides off or a dome that rotates, but the building's solid, and then the telescope rotates inside the building. This thing is different. The building, the telescope, the roof, everything rotates. And so the entire building sits on 4, they call them the bogies, is what they called them. And it's basically, you can see big train-like wheels and big motors and all that. And literally, this is what provides the right ascension for the telescope. It just rotates the entire building. So that degree of control when you're moving tons and tons and tons is actually impressive. So, okay, so anyway, that was just fascinating just to see that room and these 4 bogies literally holding up the building and the telescope and everything in it. Howard. I have no idea, but yeah, it's just a feat of engineering. Anyway, and like at least 3 different countries were involved in this. We were involved with it, Italy was involved with it, and I forget what the 3rd country was. Yeah, we have folks on Zoom, so you guys got to talk in a microphone.
Actually, the LBT itself rotates on its own pier, okay? The bogies are used for rotating the building, which has a roll-up door for the aperture. So that tracks whatever the telescope does.
Okay. That I was not aware. Elliot didn't share that little tidbit with me. So, all right. Thank you, Steve. This is like 1/3 or 1/4 of the control room. It was just too big to get a photo of the whole thing. So I just took a picture of one station. Fairly bare bones, but it worked great. Huge monitors. I'd kill for any one of their monitors. These monitors are like three feet long and 2 feet high, giant monitors, wonderful monitors. Anyway, don't ever complain about the weight of your telescope again. This is literally the mount that's holding up the 2 mirrors. So at each end of this, on one side or the other, is a giant like orange steel cradle that holds a mirror on each end. And I showed you a little bit of the scale there. That one beam there is about 3 feet in diameter. And then for counterweights, they use water. So they can fill and drain a tank and use that as a counterweight for the telescope. So it is a very impressive structure scale-wise. To give you an idea of how big that is, there is Steve at the bottom for scale, but that's just, I couldn't even fit the whole telescope in. You're not even really seeing the cradles that are holding the mirrors. That's just the mount that's holding the mirrors. And then, of course, those big rounded steel tracks you see, those are provide like your declination type adjustments and stuff. So it's actually quite an impressive little piece of equipment. There is actually one of the orange steel cradles that's holding one of those big 27-foot mirrors. And it's actually just pointed straight up right now because the telescope wasn't in use. By the way, when you have a telescope, they always tell us, right? Oh, you don't have to clean your mirror that often because, a dirty mirror isn't going to affect you that much and all that. Well, I'm a firm believer in that now because those mirrors were filthy. I mean, there's like cranes that go overhead and drip oil, like pneumatic oil and stuff like that. These mirrors were a wreck. And I went, they still work. So it was kind of impressive. And dust, as you would imagine, being up in the mountain with the roof open, it was just amazing. By the way, the other thing I noticed about observatories, 9 billion moths. There were moths everywhere. I've never seen so many moths in my life. So anyway, and actually a few on the mirror as well, dead ones. Anyway, so there's the mirrors. So there's the cradle holding it. I got up above a couple stories high and was looking down on one of the mirrors there. So there's just one of the mirrors. The other mirror is kind of up and over on the right, over the top of that orange and white structure over on the other side. I've labeled a few things just to show you. Obviously, that's the primary mirror. That's pretty easy to pick out because it's so big. But above it, up there, it's really, you can't see most of it. It's out of the picture, but the secondary mirror is up there. It's, shining back down. Something that we don't see in our small scopes that we use, but they actually have a tertiary mirror as well. And that's actually on a swivel. And it can actually take the light signal and send it to different directions. And where it's sending it is to one of those 4 pieces of equipment there, depending on what they want to do with that light. And so the first 3 there are just those round holes in the orange, which are 3 different types of equipment. And then that white box with the Pepsi symbol on the side, that's actually a piece of equipment too. And actually the name of that equipment is called the Pepsi. I don't remember exactly what it did. But anyway, they can basically rotate that tertiary mirror and direct the light into any one of those pieces of equipment to see whatever they wanted to see. So it's quite fascinating how that all worked. This is actually from a security camera of sorts that was in the control room panel, showing on the control room panel from a camera way up in the corner of the building where you could kind of look down on the whole telescope. And I was just amazed at the scale. The only thing I'd ever seen of that scale before myself, I was in college and I took a tour of a Kaiser steel mill, which was just huge in scale. And this sort of actually reminded me of the factory at Kaiser Steel. So it did, it was so big, except they're not processing metal, they're processing photons. So it's a little bit different. I think photons are lighter than metal too. I'm pretty sure. In fact, I think they don't weigh anything. So anyway, that's a little bit of that. Anyway, that is pretty much the tour. So it's a very fascinating tour. If you'd like to do it, they only do it like May to October, and you got to sign up several months in advance because they only take 8 people at a time. So it sells pretty fast. Yes? Why is it called binocular? Because there's 2 mirrors that work together just like binoculars.
That's the feel of why the
I think just for resolution is what they were going for more resolution, more detail. So, yeah. So anyway, like I said, fun thing. If you'd ever like to do it, there's the website. Of course, these meetings are recorded. You can always go back and look at the website again. But I signed up about 3 months ahead of time to get my spot there. So it was quite fun. Anyway, that is it for me. We're going to show Howard's video, but we'll take a question first, and I'll repeat it when you ask. Hang on, he'll bring you a mic. We have people out there on Zoom that want to hear the questions. So,
when you were up on top of Mount Graham, were you at the actual campground up there?
Yeah, there's 6 or 8 campgrounds up there. We were at the one just before the blacktop ended and the dirt started because the dirt road was not fun. So,
and what was the temperature up there?
A lot cooler. Yeah, it's like about 50 and 50 during the day. Yeah, exactly what he said. Around 70 during the day. Coming home to 115 was an adjustment. So after having spent 4 days at 70 degrees, I didn't really enjoy unpacking the car. So.
Just a quick comment. Maybe everybody knows this, but the 2 mirrors, the 8.4 meter mirrors, were fabricated under the stadium at the University of Arizona at the Mirror Lab, where they have spinning ovens that create the paraboloid, and then they figure it beyond that. So 2 mirrors. And my wife has walked on one of the mirrors.
Okay. So that would explain the footprints. No, I'm just so anyway. Okay, so anyway, and by the way, they refinished them. Obviously, they're huge mirrors. They're heavy. Trying to get them in and out of a 10-foot mountain road would be almost impossible because everything was built up and down a 10-foot mountain road, 10 foot wide. And so they actually have a facility there to basically recoat the mirrors. They do it every 2 years. They basically, since there's 2, that when it goes out of commission or out of commission every summer for refurbishment, they refinish one mirror and they clean the other. And then the next year they do the opposite. They refurbish one and clean the other. And they clean it using basically frozen carbon dioxide. And apparently they spray it all over the mirror and it just bonds to whatever's on the mirror, freezes it, and then when it all falls off, it's clean underneath. So they're using carbon dioxide to do it.
They told us when this was being built, okay, and they had to truck the mirrors up the mountain. So when you start getting up on where the pavement ends and it gets really bumpy, they had to transition from a horizontal placement of the mirror on the flatbed of the semi up to a vertical, okay, so they could get around the curve, because some of those curves over there, you get too close to the shoulder, there's a rock overhang. And they also told us once they got up to the top, they had a crane up there, and there wasn't enough room for these semis to turn around. So they literally had to pick the semi and flatbed up with a crane, turn it around 180 degrees and send it back down the hill.
Yeah, it's a process. So, all right. Let's see, Howard. There.
Okay, I used a Nikon P1000 125x zoom camera. You don't need that much zoom, and I didn't use that much. But these are still frames that I turned into a video.
All right, we'll go for it right now. Here, let me hit play.
And the trick is to get the exposure right when it's near maximum. And I'll show you here. These are 1 second exposures, just taking it as it went into the eclipse clouds that day. This is the diamond ring effect. This is the corona. And then if you change the exposure, you only got a few little short time to do it. That loop down at the bottom is what got me. That's one of the solar prominences. And there's the other diamond ring thing. And then it works its way back out. And Waco, Texas, other people at the hotel thought, oh, it's going to be cloudy, so they went off somewhere else. I don't know what they got, but I just stayed in place and did this thing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Howard, for bringing that in. We appreciate that.
we don't need to have the telescope in the video, but I thought it might be helpful. Okay, so I recently got a 3D printer, and I didn't really think I would use it too often, but I ended up using a lot more than I thought I would. Before we get started, also a couple of things. On the table back there, there's one box that has a lot of screws and bolts in it and everything. That whole box is $5, but everything else is $5 each. The other thing, a slight correction to what Steve was saying about the astrophotography kit that we rent and also the class that I teach. It's actually planetary imaging class, and it's also a planetary imaging kit. So on with 3D printer things. So yeah, I got a 3D printer. I thought I would just print one or two things. I came up with the design, and I was making this guy right here. I don't know about you guys, but I always have fought the finder scopes. I don't really particularly care for the ones that they have. And I came up with a nice little design that made it much easier. I'll talk about that later on, but this is why I brought the 3D printer to begin with. But I end up using it for a lot of stuff. So let's go through some of the stuff on the presentation. Here's some of the things I've created with it. The laser finder, which I just pointed out. Optical tube assembly laser. I'm going to go through each one of these things. Star sense adapter, Bantoff mask, a tri-Bantoff mask cover, and the mask itself, the evolution mount control and battery holder, mount level puck, and telescope OTA caps. So those are some of the things I've printed out with it. I'm currently working on another one where there's an old telescope. I had never seen this before, but I went to this person's house and they had what's called a Smith camera. And it's really just the telescope sort of like this that has a pocket in the side of it that you open up and you put film in there and you take the picture with the film. Anyway, I'd never seen anything like that before. I read on Cloudy Nights that that some people had converted them into digital cameras. And so I'm currently making a adapter for that, although I may not end up using it. We had a 5.5-inch telescope and an 8-inch Smith. I guess there's cameras, Smith cameras, and one of the guys from Celestron just emailed me and said they might be interested in purchasing them for historic reasons. So they were made back in the 70s. So anyway, so those are some of the things I've made with it. Let's see if I can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So the equipment that you need to do the printing is a 3D printer, obviously. If you want to do your own designs, you need a CAD program. And also, what do I have down there? A slicer program. Once you've designed what you want, you need to slice it and tell the printer how to print the object. So let's take a look at what each of these things look like. Oops. There's the example of the printer I've got. I think the bed on it is like 10 inches by 12 inches or something like that. So that's the printer I got. I think it sells for about $250 is what they sell for. There's filaments that you also buy for it that's pretty cheap. Honestly, running these things, they're very slow. I mean, one of these objects like, well, yeah, like this guy here could take, not the laser, but the base itself could take like 7 or 8 hours to print, something like that. So they take a long time to print, and also the bed's heated on it and everything. So it probably the most expensive part about printing out stuff is probably the electricity part. So that's one thing. Here's a FreeCAD. It's obviously a piece of software, and it's a CAD program. Again, a lot of people don't bother with this. They'll go to a website called Thingiverse, where there's a lot of different things that you can download. I found out that most of the stuff I want is pretty custom, and I really couldn't get on Thingiverse. So I ended up having to learn this, and it's sort of like Photoshop. It's kind of a pain in the butt to learn how to use it. It took a long time. First thing I designed took like a week to figure out how to do. I'm getting better at it, but I'm still pretty bad at it. But I can get things done with it. And then this is an example of the slicer program. Once you've got the object created in FreeCAD, you export it to a type of file and then open it up in this slicer program, and it's free also. And what this does is it'll go through, and if you look at the bottom of the screen, it says something about slice it or something like that. Anyway, it'll go through and it'll calculate how the printer needs to print the object. And then you take that file and you put it in the printer and you print it from there. Also on this, you can see you might need to do some supports for it, and there's a setting that you can do that. Those little blue fingers on there are actually just to support the overhang parts so it can print. So also one thing I learned is that heat can kill. So I put some of these stuff out on my telescope outside, and as you can see, one of the bases just completely warped. Now, there's probably filaments that are better suited for hot temperatures, but it is a 3D printer and works off heat. So be careful with 3D printed stuff unless you know that it's okay for hot temperatures. And I'm not sure what filaments those are at this point in time. The heat can warp it. Okay, so the first object, as I pointed out before, and this was the whole reason of the thing, was to make a laser pointer. And what I wanted to do initially was make it so you can put it up here, and instead of, a lot of the laser pointers have a little bracket that it fits in, and you adjust the bracket. Well, this is a typical gun laser that you could buy on Amazon. And the nice thing about this one is that it has these little knobs on it. Instead of using a tool, you can actually just turn it like this, and it'll adjust the laser. So this is a zero tool adjustment, and I really like that. Oh, over here? Here? Cool. So the other thing I made on this was I wanted to make it really flexible. So initially I wanted to have its own base, and I don't know if you can see there's a base. I don't know if this has a base on it or not, but there's actually a little plate that you can put on the telescope itself with some tape, that's a double-sided tape that you have, sort of like the tail rads. And this would slide on the plate, and these little slots here is where they slide in, and these magnets here kind of lock into place. So that was the initial design, but I also thought I wanted to make it more flexible. So the way it's designed now is you can actually just put it in your standard dovetail mount and put it in there. So as an older person, as most of us are here, I found out getting behind like a red dot and stuff like that can really make you contort and, look, get in some odd positions so you can see things. Well, with the lasers, you don't have to contort your body nearly as bad. The downside of these things are they don't work during the daytime, so you can't use them so well during the daytime. If you have astrophotographers in your area and you leave this on, they may not appreciate, laser pointing up there. So the other thing these do, the ones I've got, do have piggy tails that you can use on them where you just pinch it and the light turns on and it turns off when you're not pinching it. I find that works pretty good. The downside of that is those piggy tails tend to wear out pretty quickly. So you have to fall back to the switch. So it is a green laser, as you can see here. So that was the initial point of making these things. And so, yeah, that's that. The next item. Oh, and here's some more pictures on it for those guys at home. You can see, actually I can take my laser and point it out to you. There's the base on here. Now the guys at home can't see that, so I'll get the mouse there. Here's the base. Here's the piggy tail I was talking about, and that's interchangeable with this switch here. And that's about all about that guy there. And here it is in your standard dovetail mount. Okay, the other thing, this was part of being resulted from another astronomy club, the Superstition Mountains Astronomy League, small is what they're known as, attending their meetings. One of the guys had talked about seeing where your telescope's pointing at. He just would take a laser and point it in the eyepiece, and he could see exactly where the telescope's pointing at because the laser comes out of the main telescope, which is pretty cool. So I thought about that for a while, and I thought, you know what? What would be cool is if you could put the laser, I don't know if this is visible, Tom. You could put the laser, I could print out a 3D holder for the laser, and you can slide it in the eyepiece itself, And then you don't have to worry about getting in the exact right position because it can really be hard to get it in the exact right. And so once you do that, and you won't be able to see this, but this is actually a little brighter laser. And I found this is really handy for astrophotography, especially setting up initially. And this thing doesn't like turning on too often. Here we are. You can see the beam coming right out of it. And so this tells you exactly where you're looking at. If you're setting up your finder scope or something like that, it just makes it so much easier. And like I say, with astrophotography, it's really hard to get things in your camera. With this thing, it just makes it so much easier. I find out I use this a lot more than I ever thought I would use it. The other part of the design, it actually has some slots in it. I can probably show you the pictures. Let me see. Yeah, I don't have pictures of slots. There's actually slots in it where the laser goes in. So it can take a small variety of different size lasers. Depending on what the size of the laser is going in here, the slot, you just put it in one of the slots to turn the button on. So the slots turn the button on when you put it in the slot. The other nice thing about this is I've got it so it'll fit either, whoops, wrong piece. Either in a 1 1/4 eyepiece here, or it can fit in the 2-inch eyepieces also. So it can do both. I printed out a few of these yesterday, and they took about 5 hours each to print. So that's that. And there's a picture of it closer up. StarSense Explorer adapters, 2 models. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with what Celestron makes this thing called StarSense, and it's really a nice thing. And I don't have one here with, actually, I think I might. This is one of them. There's 2 different models. This guy here, so the downside of StarSense Explorers, what it is a cell phone adapter that you put on the side of your telescope, and using your cell phone, you can tell it what objects you want to go to. And it's really nice in that you can actually pick up normally when you calibrate a telescope mount, you have to do a 3-point alignment, and then you go ahead and you're ready to go. But if you kick the telescope or something like that, you got to do the alignment all over again. With the StarSense, all you have to do is put the cell phone on there and line the cell phone with your main scope, and you're ready to go. And you go on your screen and say, I want to look at M42, and it'll tell you point the telescope up, down, left, right, and it knows where it's going. It's plate solving is what it's doing. The other nice thing about StarSense is that you can pick up your telescope and move it, and you don't have to do any new calibrations or anything. The downside of StarSense is they don't sell it as a standalone unit. You have to actually buy the telescope, which kind of sucks. Especially if you had like a Dobsonian or something. These are really nice for Dobsonians. Something that is not a go-to telescope. It's a push-to is what you can make it into. So what I did was I made this adapter for it. So this actually will slide in also where your finder scope could slide in, and you put your phone on there. And there was an auction website that I was able to get some broken StarSense telescopes for pretty cheap. And I could take some of those, take it off of those, and then put it on these units here. And it works pretty dang good. Matter of fact, for those of you when I did the talk about Chile, I took it down to Chile and it worked great. I was up and going, and we were looking at stuff in 5 minutes. And I tried to get familiar with the southern sky, but that's a completely different sky. So it's a wonderful thing. So that's that. Oh, here's pictures of it. So the one that's in the image is different than this one. This one's for a different model StarSense, but the idea is the same. It's that black part in the picture. There is where the camera goes in, and the orange part at the bottom is actually one I have where you have 2 feet that would fit on the base of the telescope, and a piece of Velcro goes around and tightens it onto it. Well, you can see it on the left-hand side there. You can see the base, what I 3D printed is here, and there's the Velcro strips, and the phone would go right in here. You can see there's a mirror here, and that mirror shoots the sky image of the sky into your phone. Here's the other model that I made that I was just showing you guys. A little easier to print, and there's the base that you can put the StarSense Explorer into there. The Banatoff mask, that's these guys here. And I'll probably talk about this more later on in another talk. For those of you who aren't familiar with what the Banatoff mask is, I think mostly it's probably imagers that are mostly familiar with it. Because it's used for making sure your telescope's in focus. And when you're looking with your eye, you know it's in focus or not when you're looking with your eye. But with a camera in there, you want to make sure it's exactly right. And so what the idea is behind the Banatoff mask is, you see these spikes here, you put it, well, let me show you. You put it in the aperture of your telescope like so, like that. And it's going to give a pattern of that on a real bright star. And what the point is, when you focus it, what you'll see happen is this middle line here will go up either left or right, away from the spikes, you know, the cross that's made here. And that will tell you when you're in focus, this middle line is in the middle of these two other spikes. So that's how you can tell if you're in focus. It's a good mechanical way to do it. So I can make that, and you can get these on Thenaverse. I did make modifications on mine. I made it so it's easier to grasp. I put a ring on the inside that's raised so you can easily pull it out and put it back in. Like I said, I'm going to talk more about the Banatoff mask, probably another talk, because there's also what's called the tri-Banatoff mask. I'm not sure if I got images of that or not. Yeah. Yes. Oh, is it? Thank you. Oh, thank you for catching that. So, yeah, so here's an example of what it would look like focusing. Here's a very defocused star, and then as you come closer into focus, and you can see here, we're still out of focus because this spike here should be in the center. And as you continue to change the focus, this is perfect focus, right? So that's the idea of the Banatoff mask. It's really handy for astrophotography and actually planetary imaging too, because it's really important to get a good focus.
Thanks. Quick question on your star sense. First, you got to align that with your scope in the beginning. How much time does that take?
It doesn't take long at all. Matter of fact, you can do it during the daytime. So you just put it on there, and basically what you'll see is you'll see on the phone, it'll show you a piece of sky, and it's a larger piece of sky. And of course, you put your eyepiece in here and you look at, so what you do is you find the object that you're interested in, let's say atop of a building somewhere in the main scope, put your phone on here and make sure the phone's centered up in that holder. And then when you turn on the phone and do the calibration, it shows you a really large area of sky. You zoom into it and just use the crosshairs to put it right dead center on there. So 5 minutes maybe at most. Yeah, I don't know why they don't sell it by itself, because it could be a great product, especially for anyone who doesn't have a go-to telescope. It's just the bomb. So anyway, so that's the idea of the Banatoff mask. I'm going longer than I think I should, right? Okay, so I'm going to cut it short. A teaser for maybe later on is the tri-Banatoff mask. That tells you if you're collimated too, and we can talk about that later on. So, and here's an example of a tri-Banatoff mask. Then the evolution mount, there's a holder here, if you guys see. Basically, this is a holder that you can put your controller on. That's one of the downsides about these Celestrons, next star telescopes. There's nowhere to put the dang control at, and it always hits the ground. The other nice thing about this design is that I've also made it so it can hold the battery in it also. So the battery travels around with the mount. You don't have to worry about cord wrap. Final thing I got in here, and this is kind of specialized, this is for ZWO, is a little two-way level. So the nice thing about this, it's oriented so that one level shows you whether the foot on this side has to go up or the foot on this side has to go down. The other level shows the other foot. So it's really easy to tell if you're level and which foot needs to be adjusted. It's really nice. Simple, but nice. And there's an example of it. And then there's caps. Another thing I hate about the Celestron, and actually a lot of the smaller telescopes, the caps are always coming off or falling or breaking. So you can make them design. This one, you can either go on the outside of the OTA or the inside. This one I've got, so it's a nice little tight fit on the inside and it holds pretty well. So, So the 3D printing just gives you the ability to customize. And like I said, I found out I was doing this a lot more than I expected to do it. But it's really handy and you can make some pretty neat stuff with it. If any of you guys are interested in printing one of these files out, I'll be happy to let you print out and do stuff on your own. If not, here's the sales pitch. I do have some stuff printed out already for the OTA laser. And also this guy is running $45 and the laser's $35, with the thing OTA. You're welcome to come up here and get it. I have some printed out if you want. If not, that's fine too. So I think that's pretty much it. Questions?
I was going to say and tell you why Celestron don't sell you the little star sense dock.
Oh, tell me, please.
I asked them directly, and of course they didn't want to give me an answer, but I kind of put 2 and 2 together. They're really the only major manufacturer who makes a product like that. And if they were to just sell the dock by itself, even for a ridiculous amount of money, then what you're basically telling them is, I don't want to buy your telescope, just give me the fancy play toy. And they can kind of get around that by pairing the two together and not separating them. That's at least what I gathered from doing a little bit of research online and whatnot about it. But yeah, I've asked them at least twice if they would ever, at least sell a replacement.
Yeah, there's people that buy their cheapest model for like a couple $100, $250, rip that thing off of it and give it away.
That's exactly what I mean. If you don't want to buy a Celestron telescope, or you have a really nice Dob, let's say one of those truss tube.
Yeah,
Dobs,
exactly.
That's probably your best bet. But as somebody with one of their StarSense Dobsonians, I bring it out all the time. It's actually a pretty good scope.
Yeah, that StarSense works so incredibly well. It really does. It's amazing. So if you guys have a big Dob or something that you want, a push-to type of telescope, you should look into that.
They do make a tabletop, like little Dob now with the StarSense.
I did not know that.
Cheaper.
Oh, really?
They just came out with a bunch of new models for it. Cheaper than the bigger ones, obviously. That would probably be your best bet for putting it onto another Dob.
Yeah, and I think the adapter you can actually, I think this adapter you can get on Thenaverse, download it. I may have made some modifications to it. I can't remember if I did or not, but yeah.
James, first a public service announcement, okay? People that are interested in using the digital printer, I don't know if you're aware or not, but the library, Mesa Library on Power, has digital printers in there, and I think they use that same CAD program.
Oh, they have 3D printers.
If you want
Okay.
to play with it, the kids haven't broken it yet, you might look at that. Second question, as far as the OTA laser, does that only work with an SCT, or does it work on other forms of telescopes?
No, it should work with, as far as I can tell, it works with any telescope. When you look at it, you'll see there's a hole that the laser comes out of in the center here. It's slightly off-centered, so it works with SMIC Cassegrains because they have a central obstruction. But I've used on some Dobsonians that seem to work fine also. So yeah, I find if it's dead center for the Dobbs, it shouldn't make any difference, but the SMIC Cassegrains it does. Okay, that's it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Kevin Schindler. Can everybody hear me okay? Kevin has come down here this evening from Lowell Observatory. He's the historian and public information officer for Lowell. And he's going to tell us about some exciting things that are going on at Lowell. And as a bonus, he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Burnham Celestial Handbook series, which is significant roots in the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff. So if you'd give Kevin a big round of applause here.
Thanks, Woody, and thanks for having me here tonight. It's great to see a lot of people that I've run into in the past. Tom is a great friend of Lowell Observatory, and in fact, in November 16th, we're going to be opening our new Astronomy Discovery Center, and there's going to be this really big picture in there. And if you look in microprint, you're going to see courtesy Tom Polakis. So he'll be famous, like he's not now. So this is such a fun group, and I know there's a lot of interest and connection with Robert Burnham Jr. And there's some folks who aren't familiar with him or his legacy. I think most of you probably have some knowledge of him. How many of you have the 3-volume set? It's almost like, who doesn't have this, right? This is such, talk about astronomy literature and resource. Even though some of the data is outdated, I still use it all the time. It's a great read. And, the combination of data and history and coins and mythology and everything else is just fabulous. And it's, so many astronomers are familiar with it, but the story of Robert Burnham Jr. himself is a really interesting story. Many of you know lots are part of the story, but it's something that I've become interested in, over the years, because I want to make sure that he's remembered in the history of astronomy. At Lowell Observatory, where I've worked for 29 years now, when I started, I had no idea who he was because I didn't have an astronomy background, and then I'd see his name once in a while, but we never really had much information about him. And then several years back, a certain astronomy club and members raised money to build a plaque. And then a couple of years ago, we created a little exhibit because we want to make sure his story is known. So I want to tell that story tonight because I think it's really important. And then after that, I want to talk just a little bit about our new Astronomy Discovery Center. It's the 40,000 square foot facility that opens in November. It's so cool. It's cool on steroids. Like the main theater that has the screen that's 25 feet tall and 110 feet or so curved. It's this immersive thing, and it's all LED technology. And so it's something like 250,000 LEDs, and black is black. It's not projection. It's true black. But that's not even the coolest part of it to me. There's more to it that I think is really neat, especially the planetarium, as it were. So I'm going to talk about that at the end. I'll start talking about it more now, so I'll stop and talk about Burnham. So I want to make sure we talk about the Astronomy Discovery Center and also put out an invitation. We're doing hard hat tours over the next few months. And if you want to try to get in and see it, we'd like to accommodate that because it's really a neat facility. So the reason we're able to build an Astronomy Discovery Center, there's a lot of reasons. People are really interested in astronomy. Astrotourism is becoming quite popular. At Lowell Observatory, though, we also have this heritage of science and public outreach. And there's so many great science stories. One of my favorites is Robert Burnham. If you have read the 3-volume set, and thanks to Woody for bringing these in. I think we're going to auction them off afterwards. But in the introduction section of his book, Robert writes, "The appeal of astronomy is both intellectual and aesthetic. It combines the thrill of exploration and discovery, the fun of sightseeing, and the sheer pleasure of firsthand acquaintance with the incredibly wonderful and beautiful things." Oh, that's gorgeous. And that's what this Celestial Handbook is. It really gets down to why we love astronomy, the passion of astronomy. And so he wrote that in the introduction, and I think it really resonates today more than ever. And of course, this is the set we're talking about. I just showed you one. The story of this and how it came to be and Robert Burnham is really fascinating, I think. And a friend, Bill Sheehan, many of you are familiar with his writings. He's an astronomy historian. We've talked about maybe Bill leading an effort to write a book about Robert because there's not just the history of what he did, but the psychological components that made Robert a very complex person that would be interesting to understand. But for tonight, we'll just give kind of a introduction to Robert and who he was. So here he is. not long after he was born, June 16th, 1931, which is exactly 10 days after my dad was born, but in a different place. He was born in Chicago. And the family lived there for a few years. And then in 1940, they moved to Prescott. And life in Prescott was pretty straightforward for young Robert. He went to school. He was really interested in science. He collected rocks and minerals and fossils. He developed an interest in astronomy at a young age. It's unclear. I've never seen anything of what first inspired that interest, but he just seemed to always have it. He built his own telescopes and had his own little laboratory at the house. And his family really, liked him doing this stuff. So he graduated from high school. Here's a copy of his diploma. It's from 1949, Prescott High School. And so he graduates. What's he going to do? He stayed around the house for a couple of years, and his parents were very happy with that. They liked the idea of the kids staying at home. There was Robert and his sister, and they were happy with him staying home. 1951, as the Korean War broke out, he enlisted in the Air Force. And he was in the Air Force for 4 years. Here's a picture of him before he went off to duty. And this is a classic Robert Burnham Jr. picture. There he is standing rail thin, standing with his parents. And of course, this trusty telescope is in the back. It's a member of the family. It has to be in the picture. So he went overseas, and military seemed to be good for him because it was very regimented. And that seemed to be what he needed, as we'll see later on. So after 4 years, he came back home and went back to the family house. He got a job as a clerk, a pretty basic, boring job probably, but it seems that was okay with him because he put his time in working, and then at nighttime is when his mind really flourished. He set the telescope up. This is his lab. In his house, you can see holy cow, there's a microscope, there's dinosaur models, there's little bottles of some sort of carcinogens, who knows what. There's that drawing of Saturn, which he did himself. There's just a mix of stuff. He was interested in a lot of different things. And so his life went for a couple of years. He worked as a clerk during the daytime. Very, again, basic job. You go in, do the work, come home. Even his only living relative is a niece, Donna. And she said that at times, multiple times, the family suggested he see a psychiatrist because something didn't seem quite right. He was a very kind person, as she says, but he didn't really connect with adults very well, some that he was close with. He seemed to connect better with kids, like when he moved to Lowell Observatory, connected with the kids that lived on the hill. But there was just something that he didn't seem to be, well, we'd maybe say a normally functioning adult. It's hard to say what it was, but something wasn't quite right. And again, that's coming from his niece. But that's okay. He's a clerk. He's doing his astronomy. He's collecting rocks and fossils, and that's all great. And then one day in 1957, he has his telescope set up, and he detects this little smudge in the sky, and it turns out to be a comet that nobody else had ever seen before. In fact, there was somebody else, a pair of astronomers who the same time saw it for the first time. So it was named after them as Burnham, and I can't remember the other folks' name. But so he discovered a comet. That's pretty cool. And that probably would have been how his life continued. That's neat, he discovered a comet. But his mother she wrote into the newspapers a lot. She wrote to the letters to the editor a lot. And she kind of liked this story and wanted to let the world know that her son discovered a comet. So she contacted the newspaper, knew the editor and everything, and said, hey, this is a great story, let's publish it. And he said, sure, let's publish it. Well, it got the attention, and I'm sorry for the lousiness of the picture. This is a picture of a newspaper. We don't have the scanned version. This is the best I've got. But it caught the attention of a politician, Barry Goldwater. And And the timing was exquisite because this is just after Sputnik went up, and Sputnik really got the attention of leadership in the United States that, my gosh, we're in this Cold War with the Soviet Union. Now this is what turned out to be the beginning of the space race. If they can send satellites up there, that means they can spy on us, they can drop bombs. This turned into a big area of concern. So political leaders like Barry Goldwater, he saw this discovery as a great story for America. This young self-taught astronomer discovered a comet. I'm going to go meet him. So Barry Goldwater made sure to meet Robert Burnham Jr. He even gave him an old family telescope. And we're still trying to figure out whatever happened to that telescope. But it was in the Goldwater family for decades. And so this really made the news because this young self-taught astronomer in Prescott discovered his own comet. What a great story for America. Well, a lot of people saw this story, including this guy. His name is Henry Gickless. And Henry was an astronomer that grew up on the side of Mars Hill where Lowell Observatory is located. His father helped build one of the early telescopes there. And Henry was starting a project, a proper motion survey, looking at Clyde Tombaugh, who discovered Pluto when he was searching for Planet X, as Percival Lowell had called it. Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto, then he stayed at the observatory another 14 years, photographing a vast majority of the sky. Well, jump ahead 20 years, and Henry Gickless had this idea, let's use the images that Tombaugh took as a first generation for proper motion study. We'll rephotograph the sky and then measure the position of the stars and how they've changed over time. And so Henry started this project, but who's going to actually do the work? Henry would do some, but this is night after night on clear nights, moonless nights, taking images, and then during the daytime, putting these images on a modern day blink comparator and analyzing them and looking for star motion, measuring the position and such. Well, just when he's trying to figure out who's going to work on this, he sees this newspaper ad. And so he contacts this Robert Burnham Jr. guy and invites him to lunch. And turns out this guy really knows his stuff. Let's hire him to work on the proper motion survey. And I think it's an interesting story because if we go back, I guess 20, 25 years before this time, almost 30 years, the director of Lowell Observatory, Vesto Slifer, had a similar problem. He was starting this project, but he didn't have anybody to work on it. He's contacting colleagues around the country. Do you know if anybody can help with this? Because everybody here is busy. And just then he gets this letter from a 23-year-old farmer, self-taught astronomer, who says, I made these drawings. What do you think of them? And it was perfect. This guy knew what he was doing. That guy's name was Clyde Tombaugh. He was hired to search for a planet, and within a year, he discovered Pluto. So it's kind of history repeating itself. Gickless was looking for somebody to do the search. Lo and behold, here's this guy just down the road in Prescott who discovered this comet. Let's hire him. So they hired him. And here he is sitting at the quote unquote modern day blink comparator. This just classic 1950s battleship gray machine that's still in the basement of the office building that they occupied. And then the guy next to him is Norm Thomas. And so they're the ones that did most of the work with the proper motion survey. And this worked out to be great for Robert Burnham Jr. because his job was very straightforward. He was also given a place to live. If you look to the right, there's a small cabin. That's where he lived for years. For those of you who know Brian Skiff, a legend in the astronomy community who I think he knows the night sky better than everybody else at Lowell Observatory combined. He lived in that cottage for years. It had to be torn down a couple of years ago because it was really hazardous. But they gave Robert a place to live. And this is a small building. It had like originally one bedroom and a small living room. They expanded it a little bit, but he had his rock and mineral collection there. This is a picture from inside the cabin. So, daytime, just kind of like when he was at home. Daytime, he's working. In this case, he's doing astronomy, which he loves. At nighttime, he's working on his mineral collection. He goes on weekends and collects rocks and minerals. He does some drawings. He does paintings, and kind of a Chesney Bonistel type stuff. And he did a bunch of these things. And really, this guy was talented in so many ways. And then, this is his spare time. And then something else he did in his spare time that he had started thinking about when he was in Prescott was he had, through the years, he had accumulated information on all the different constellations. And this project grew, and again, in his spare time, he worked on what became known as the Celestial Handbook. And there's some great stories about this. Again, his niece remembers some of this stuff, and some of the kids that lived on Mars Hill at the time, kids of the astronomers, they helped out with this. Robert did this in his spare time. The majority of pictures in the handbook he got from the Pluto Discovery Telescope. And so he initially did this in the 3-ring binders. And as Donna tells his niece, when he would get an order for a couple of these things, because he was selling them, he would get the Hill kids. They would take all of these copies that he made, and they would go into the basement of what's called the Schleifer building, the main building on campus with a big rotunda dome. They had a big room there, and they would line up tables and put all the sheets out, and then the kids would assemble them. They get $1 per book that they assembled, and then Robert would sell them for a few bucks. And that was the beginnings of the handbook. And then years later, again, this is over the course of a couple decades. He was at Lowell for 20 years. Burnham, according to work that Tony Ortega has done, as well as Donna, has said that Burnham really thought this was going to be his future. He didn't know how long he would be at Lowell Observatory, although 20 years is a pretty good run. But he wanted to make a lot of money with this, so he sold the rights to Dover, which was sort of a sad thing. Whether Robert intentionally got taken to the cleaners, or he wasn't, savvy enough. The deal he got was lousy. The royalties were very little for this, and he lost the rights to it also. In fact, periodically, there's the idea of somebody updating this, which would be a monumental task. But there's the issue of working with Dover, and if they have the rights. And I don't know, Tom, if you've ever looked into this, but as I understand, it's a little bit of a rat's nest to negotiate working with them. I don't know. Okay, so anyways, Dover gets the rights. Well, 1979, Henry Gickless is nearing retirement. He's 69 years old now. And the proper motion survey ends. And so the money has run out, so the proper motion survey ends. This is a little sticky to me because through the years, there's been different ideas of what actually happened. Some say that the observatory dumped him. The survey's over, we don't want you anymore. There is the reality that the observatory was financially in a pretty lean time, and Henry Gickless retired. There wasn't funding for it. I'm not sure if the observatory really wanted him, if they could have, if there was money. Former director Bob Millis said that he and his wife gave some money to Robert just to help him after he left the observatory. There wasn't a position for him, and so he had to leave the observatory. Some friends helped him a little bit, but he was kind of lost because he needed that regimented lifestyle that, according to Donna, and so he was lost. He didn't have a place to live. He didn't have a source of income. He was hoping that these books would be a source of income, but clearly that wasn't working out. And so he lived with his sister for a few years, and then it kind of went downhill from there. Now, for most people, most people in the astronomy world, they had no idea about any of this because there was also Robert Burnham, the editor of Astronomy magazine, happened to be the same name. So most people figured it was the same person, but it was actually different. Robert Burnham Jr., Robert Burnham. And so he kind of disappeared. And it was a kind of an unfortunate thing that happened. He was living with his sister, and they weren't getting along. Robert, as the niece said, was kind of challenging. And then one day he just disappeared. And the family didn't know what happened to him until a few years later. The son of one of the astronomers, the astronomer Norm Thomas, who we saw, his son Bruce, was a friend of Robert's. Bruce grew up, he was in San Diego in the, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. And he was walking down Balboa Park, and he saw this guy, kind of a scraggly looking guy, selling paintings of cats. And he looked closely and realized it was Robert Burnham Jr. And he walked up and said, "Bob, is that you?" And Robert just said, like, as if nothing had happened, "Oh, hi, Bruce. It's great to see you. How are you?" And I mean, it was just kind of a bizarro thing, but that's how kind of he was rediscovered, as it were. And then a couple of years later, 1993, Robert, as records show, in hindsight, he had been ill with several maladies, and he died at the age of 61. And it was tragic because his family had never seen him again. They didn't actually know he had died for a while. And to add insult to injury, I'll mention this in a minute also, but his grave marker where he was buried misspelled his name. So, like, what a slap at, he's forgotten. Nobody knew what happened to him, and then they misspell his name. Luckily, though, what I see as a tragedy is because of the efforts of one person in particular, Tony Ortega. He's really brought this to light. Tony, kind of an investigative journalist, was writing for the Phoenix New Times. He now lives in New York, but he's the one that pieced together what happened. He found out more information that Robert was doing these cat paintings, and this is what he was selling. I mean, there are a few of these around. Donna has a couple of these, but what a great find this would be to find a couple of these things for sale that were Robert Burnham Jr.'s. I mean, people buying them had no idea who this guy was. He was just, I mean, really looked like a homeless person trying to make a couple bucks in Balboa Park. But I think thanks to people like Tom and Jennifer and others and Tony, I think Robert's not going to be a forgotten person. He's going to be looked upon as sort of a tragic life in some ways, but what a contribution he made. If you go to San Diego today, there's his grave marker. They fixed it. I'm pointing to it there. They fixed the name so it's spelled correctly. So this is what it looks like. It's kind of facing a wall. If you look outward, what a gorgeous view. I recommend going there. If you're a nerd in any way, you should go there when you're in San Diego. It's a great view. And then it's the same cemetery where there's a cenotaph for Wally Schirra, also one of the Mercury astronauts. So I highly recommend going there. Well, so the tragedy of Robert Burnham, he's confused with another Robert Burnham. Nobody knows what happened to him. His name is misspelled on his grave marker. But that started changing, I guess it would be about 2010 or so, that members of this group and other amateur clubs, there's Tom's wife, Jennifer, led this effort to get a plaque created that would celebrate Robert Burnham Jr. And that plaque was put on this rock, which is right along the walkway that leads up to Pluto Discovery Telescope. So that sounds like a good story, but then it's like, what else can happen to Robert Burnham Jr.'s memory? Somewhere along the way, the trustee of Lowell Observatory, we have a sole trustee. His name at the time was Bill Putnam, a larger-than-life character that sometimes would just get the backhoe, named Kathy, and move stuff. And through the years, he took out the corner of a building. He took down electric lines. He once was digging a hole where he was going to put a patio, and he dug up the gas line, and luckily it didn't rupture. But he should have been fined big for it, but he somehow talked himself out of that. So Bill was a great person, but sometimes he would get Kathy and do damage. Well, he was doing landscaping in this area, and he wanted to move the rock some in a different place. And in doing so, it scratched up the plaque. And so, way to go, Lowell Observatory. Here we go, Robert Burnham. We're killing his legacy again. So finally, a few years ago, the team at Lowell tried to fix it, but then the plaque was replaced, and so it's cleaner now and in good shape. So that was kind of the first effort. And then a couple of years ago, we really wanted to celebrate Robert and do more than the plaque in addition to the plaque. And so you decided to create a little display inside of our Rotunda Museum. And so here is a lineup of people. We did this talk, and I'm going to show a couple pictures, Bernie, yeah, that show this. Bill Sheehan is on the left, astronomy historian. It looks like Brad Pitt right next to him. And then Donna Shirley, or Donna, his Robert's niece, and then Tony Ortega, who flew in from New York, and then Brian Skiff. So we did this program, the celebration, and then went to the Rotunda. Here's Tony and Donna. And then here's the display inside the Rotunda that you can see today. So, I'd like to see us do more, but as a start, we have that plaque outside. We have this display in here that tells his life. Tony, actually that typewriter you see, Tony donated that to be put on display with it. And there's some of Burnham's, a couple of his cat drawings and other stuff in there. So I think it falls upon us at Lowell Observatory, especially to make sure that his memory is properly curated for history. And again, I think folks in here, especially Tom and Jennifer, who did so much to make that plaque happen to get this all rolling. So to me, a fascinating story, a tragic story, but let's remember everything he did in his spare time. He wrote that book, so really remarkable stuff. So I don't know if that's brief, but that's a brief introduction to Robert Burnham Jr. and kind of the story behind, we know the book, but this is a story of the guy that made it happen. So with that, I just want to mention, I should go back. This reminds me of other people we think of Starry Night. Van Gogh is another tragic figure, but we remember in his lifetime, he wasn't celebrated so much, but we celebrate him now. I think the same with Robert Burnham Jr. It's too bad that he didn't see this recognition in his lifetime as much as he should have, but we're trying to make up for that now. Which leads me to this, what else is going on at Lowell Observatory? Again, Robert Burnham Jr. is part of this puzzle, part of this pyramid that made contributions that continue to research at Lowell Observatory to where in the late 1990s, the observatory had got to a point where, okay, we've got all this great research in the past. Besto-Slipher's recessional velocity measurements, Clyde Tombaugh's discovery of Pluto, Robert Burnham's work with the Celestial Handbook and the Proper Motion Survey, discovery of the rings of Uranus, atmosphere of Pluto. But our telescopes were getting smaller. If we're going to continue the legacy of people like Robert Burnham Jr., we have to get a new telescope, a big one. And that's when we got the Lowell Discovery Telescope. I think it's still the 5th largest in the continental US. It was when it was built. But it's one of the most versatile telescopes because, and I know a lot of you have seen this, it's one of the most versatile telescopes because of the instrument cube down here. Traditional large telescopes, you have one instrument that can take you a day or a couple days to change out. And so, what if you have somebody that wants to use a photometer to look at a comet, but then an imager to take a picture of something else? You lose a couple days in changing out the equipment. With this, you have this instrument that holds this device that holds 5 different instruments, and you push a button in the matter of less than a minute, the whole thing rotates around and the light path is going through a different instrument. So you can use different instruments almost simultaneously. So this is really one of the most impressive telescopes you'll ever see. And if you haven't seen this, let me know or let Tom know, and I'd be glad to set up a trip to go out there and see it. And we can do a field trip out there. We can't do a huge group, but we can always figure that sort of thing out. Sometimes, we'll get a group out there, then some of the group will go inside an adjoining building where the mirror is recoded, and then others are in the dome. So if you guys want to do that, let us know. I'd be glad to set that up. So this is the main research telescope at the observatory, and this costs $53 million. And there's a lot of other telescopes we have at the observatory, but I like to look at the other end of the spectrum. This is $53 million, and this is, I don't know, a few $100. These are just off-the-shelf security cameras. This is one of our astronomers, Nick Moskovitz, and he's got these dozen or so security cameras in this. You can see how big the box is. And he's got a setup here. This is on top of the Schleifer building at the observatory. That's the Rotunda Dome right to his left. There's one of these at Media Crater, one there's several of them around northern Arizona. And all they do is look at the sky and video the sky. But if somebody reports a bolide, bright meteor shooting through the sky, we go back to the video, and all the cameras looking at slightly different angles, they can triangulate and figure out if that thing didn't burn up, where's it going to land? And then you can go look for it. And so I think, Tom, you were involved with the Albuquerque search a couple of years ago. Is that right? Yeah. So one of the first efforts was the whole idea is pinpointing, and then we send a team out and see if we can find any pieces of meteorite. And I was on day 2. I think I didn't see you, but you were day 1, I think. And so there were, I don't know, a dozen people over a couple of days, and went to the site where Nick thought we might find stuff. Didn't find any meteorites. There were some, I don't know, we found some neat Cretaceous fossils and a lot of animal bones, but no meteorites. But that was the first real effort. So he's still working on this technique to where at some point there's another team that found some meteorites in eastern Arizona a few years ago. So it just shows that a $53 million instrument and something like this, you don't have to have the state-of-the-art telescope to be able to do neat research. So our research program is going stronger than ever, and then so is our outreach. And that's what I want to end with is, again, this legacy of Lowell Observatory and the heritage of research. That was why Percival Lowell set the observatory up in 1894 to do research. But he also said, what's the point of doing research unless you share it with everybody? Make even non-professionals co-discoverers. And so that's something the observatory has taken very seriously. And in recent years, those efforts have been really paying off to the point where the observatory was outgrowing the visitor facilities. The Steele Visitor Center, as it's called, was built in 1994 in celebration of the observatory centennial, and we outgrew it. We are getting 110,000 visitors in a facility that was designed for 60 or 70,000. There's not enough parking, long lines, there's not enough things to do. So a few years ago, the observatory decided to really expand the visitor experience. Phase 1 is to build this new observing plaza, the Giovanni Open Deck Observatory. That hangar-like building rolls back on tracks, and you have an instant star party with 6 telescopes of different sizes to look at different things. Two of them are attached to monitors, and so we don't want to lose the excitement of looking through an eyepiece, but also you can have something on the monitor. One of the astronomers can explain their research, and it's a great teaching tool. So that was kind of the appetizer, and then the main course is what is going to be opening in November, and this is a drawing of the opening. I have pictures of it and a video, but for sake of time, I'm just showing you the kind of eye candy here. the construction on this is going really fast. It opens in November 16th is the grand opening. And this is 40,000 square feet. So it's 7 times the square footage of the old visitor center. It's got 3 stories. I was telling you about the main screen in here that's 25 feet high, all LED technology. To me, I don't know, to me the coolest thing is the planetarium, as it were. On the top floor, there's about 160, 170 seats. They're not installed yet, but the seats are tilted back just like in a planetarium. But instead of looking at stars projected on the ceiling, you're going to look at the actual dark skies because of Flagstaff's famously dark skies. The seats are heated, by the way, because it does get nippy in Flagstaff even in the summertime. And so you have this 160, 170 seat theater inside with this LED technology, that theater on the top, and then exhibit areas. There's one for young kids. And this, I mean, this is a destination in itself. And then, oh yeah, there's still all the other stuff at the observatory to see. And so this is going to be something I think is going to be a crown jewel for not just Lowell, not just Flagstaff, but for all of Arizona. And ironically, or coincidentally, or whatever, the final price tag on this is $53 million, the same as the Lowell Discovery Telescope. It was a lot less before that little event we had in 2020, COVID, that closed everything and drove the cost of goods up 30% because of supply chain issues. But it came in at 53 million. So that's opening soon also. And again, just like the offer with LDT, if you'd like to see this, we're doing hard hat tours. And so you can come up at specific times and do a tour and see what it's going to look like. It's pretty neat. So with that, we're right at 9 o'clock. And so I'm going to end the program. I could talk about this stuff all night because it's fun. But does anybody have any questions about or comments, especially about Robert Burnham Jr. or about the Discovery Center?
So one quick comment about the open air planetarium, if you will. I would come back from Anderson Mesa, which is 9 miles away from Flagstaff by air, and real dark. And then I'd come back from working a night and it'd still be 4 in the morning and still dark. And even though you're right at the edge of Flagstaff, which has 70,000 people now,
yeah,
it's the best lighting ordinance in the country, thanks to Chris Luganville mostly. And it's still dark there. It's still reasonably a dark sky. So I think that planetarium thing is going to be awesome.
Oh, it's neat.
Yeah, that's going to work out.
For if you're really a hardcore astronomer, the skies aren't dark, but you can see the Milky Way and the city is right there. I mean, it's neat how many people I've seen tear up because they're standing right there and they can see Flagstaff below and they can look up and they can see the Milky Way and they've never seen it before. And yet they can there. So, yep.
Yeah, another comment. When you showed the Tony Ortega article, that's still online. You can Google that, Tony Ortega and Robert Burnham Jr. And it's an incredible, he did such a good job.
Yeah.
I remember when that first came out. And yeah, if you want to get a little bit more detail, you said most of it. I mean, a lot of the things that are in there, you mentioned. The one thing that you could have added was Dover, and probably most people in here got the 3-volume Burnham because you got it for like $1. Because you joined the book club. Well, the problem with that is that made no royalties for that, and that's why Burnham never got any money for it.
Right, so, yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any volunteers to update the manual, but get started.
I think very long ago, probably when I was pretty small, I learned about the blank comparator. And so I visited the Lowell, probably been 30 years now. And I was disappointed because there was a blank comparator there, but it wasn't set up properly and it wasn't operating. I hope you'll have a blank comparator set up somewhere there because I think that was one of the most important things that was developed.
Well, since your time, the blink comparator that Clyde Tombaugh used, gosh, when I got there in 1995, they had the right way. And in fact, for years, you could push it and look through the eyepiece and blink just like he did.
Okay, and I did,
But-
and it didn't work. I mean,
Okay.
it wasn't working. I think
Yeah.
it was his device, so I hope you're preserving that.
Well,
Great.
it's a little bit different now because for years, I think it was because when I started, Ralph Nye, his name was, who did all the renovation telescopes, he kept a close eye on it and kept it running pretty well. But a few years ago, the Smithsonian wanted to borrow it. And so it went over to the Smithsonian, but they created a display case that is completely plexiglassed in because, 5-6 million people pushing that button is going to wear out. So when it was brought back, we used the same case. So you can't push the button anymore because Ralph's retired and nobody's there to rebuild it.
And so forth.
Yeah, but it's great to see it. And then if you ever want to see the other blink comparator, it's right below in the basement, in the plate vault where all the glass plates are.
Okay, just one question. I remember reading the New Times article maybe 20 years ago. I think I read it several different times. Did Robert Bottom Jr. only discover one, or did he discover multiple comets?
He discovered multiple.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that was the first one. And one of those pictures I showed, he had one of his comets, a picture of one of his comets above his little laboratory.
Any other questions for Kevin? Comments? Well, let's give Kevin a big thank you.
Well, and thanks for having me in tonight. And again, you can reach out to me. I'm kevin@lowell.edu, or get through Tom or Woody or others. And if you get up to Lowell Observatory, I'd be glad to show you around, even if you're just bringing family up, because it's fun for us to be able to show you everything. So just let me know. And I've got some books over there if you want to, if you're desperate for entertainment. But there's also a bunch of stickers that you can take those. There are some of the different telescopes and stuff.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.